What is up, guys? It is AJ. I'm here with another episode of the Cage MMA podcast. Today, it's a solo show, and I'm going to be talking about this weekend's fight between Overeem and Harris and the whole card. It's a post-fight analysis and also what's next for the fighters on the card. So without further ado, let's start it up. First fight of the night, Rodrigo Nascimento pulls off a submission victory over Don'Tale Mayes. I am impressed by Nascimento. I think he's a very good grappler and somebody to watch at heavyweight. I think he could be a top 15 guy. He's shown really good grappling. For his next matchup, I really like this, and I believe he may have called for it. If we can find Chase Sherman here, he's somewhere in the top 39. Chase Sherman. I like this matchup. I think this is a good fight for him. I feel like stylistically he will beat Sherman and submit him as well as he did to Don'Tale Mayes. Sherman also looked good this past week, but I think the styles make the fights, and I would like to see that matchup. For Don'Tale Mayes, I personally think what makes the most sense is going to be a debuting fighter. I don't think they're going to cut him just yet. He was on a 4-fight winning streak before his past 2 in the UFC. Keep him around, and let's see what he's got left in the tank. Let's see if he's able to, practice his grappling a bit more, get a bit more seasoned. And I still think that he could be a lower tier guy at heavyweight in the UFC. So let's get to the next fight. Courtney Casey got a submission win in the first round versus Mara Borella. With this fight, I was impressed by the jiu-jitsu skills. And for Courtney Casey, she's fought a lot of high-level talent in the UFC. She's lost to a lot of good fighters, but I still think she's in the mix. She's ranked 29 on Tapology. I wish the UFC had like a top 20 ranking system, but they only go to 15. But who would be next? If I'm the UFC, I'm leaning towards this fight, maybe with Marina Moraes, or possibly, if I can find her, Van Zant. That's a possible matchup too. The Van Zant fight. I mean, those are two fights I think that make sense. They're not super highly ranked. I mean, I think this Marina Moraes matchup is actually better in terms of who's a harder matchup. I think that Marina Moraes is probably a tougher matchup than Paige Van Zant. Also, a matchup versus Antonia Shevchenko is possible. Those are my 3 picks, but I will say if I'm going to be the matchmaker for the UFC, I'm leaning towards that Moraes fight. For Borella, I think possibly a fight versus maybe like Ashley Evans Smith or really Rachel Ostovich. Truly, my first pick, if I'm giving Borella another fight, it's going to be Ostovich. She's 4-5 as a pro, loser leaves town type of fight. I think that's the one to make. But let's get back to the card and move on to the next fight. Nate Landwehr, very tough, durable fighter, beast of a fighter, defeats Darren Elkins, who's another very tough, durable fighter who was bleeding badly. I thought it was a really close fight, but Landwehr did start turning it up late. Darren had a really good first round. For Nate, I think that he's still a solid fighter. I mean, I still think he needs to prove himself a bit more in the UFC. He lost his debut, but he did win this hard-fought fight against, a crafty vet in Elkins. If I am the UFC, I think the fight that he called for against Movsar Evloev, I believe you say his name, makes a lot of sense, and I would be interested in seeing that fight. And if not against him, you could possibly see, I mean, Charles Jourdain's coming off a good win, but is that something the UFC wants to do? Grant Dawson's another guy. I mean, if they're looking to put prospect versus prospect, I like the Nate versus Grant Dawson fight more than somebody else like Chas Skelly, who's honestly not even as good as Darren Elkins, and he lost to Darren Elkins. So I think maybe move him to another prospect fight. I'd give either Grant Dawson or I would go with Movsar Evloev. He also called for that fight, so it makes sense. From the UFC, though, Darren Elkins, I mean, he's still a solid fighter to have in the UFC. He's a scrappy guy. I like the Kevin Aguilar fight. I think that's an interesting matchup on guys coming off consistent losses, almost like a loser leaves town fight. Also, even though Edson Barboza deserved the win, something that could be considered there for more of a tune-up for Barboza, or the Korean Superboy, Doo Ho Choi. Those are my 3 for that. If I'm the matchmaker, the UFC, and I have it down to 1, I'm going to lean towards this Kevin Aguilar fight simply because I believe that Doo Ho Choi is a harder matchup, and I think that Elkins, I'm not saying they want to give him the win, but stylistically I feel this is better for him. But I wouldn't be surprised with either of those 2 matchups next. Now let's get to the next fight on the card. Okay, Giga Chikadze handled the late replacement Erwin Rivera. He said he wants a higher rated opponent. At the end of the day, he's won by decision in his past three bouts on the UFC, two split decisions. The Rivera one against the smaller Rivera, dominant decision. A good win streak since losing on the Contender Series a while back to Austin Springer. But does he really deserve that high level of a guy just yet? He's newer to the sport. Excuse me, he's newer to MMA, or excuse, I'm saying the wrong thing. He's newer to the UFC, kind of newer to MMA, coming from a background in kickboxing. I think there's a couple intriguing matchups. Charles Jourdain could be one. I know I mentioned him earlier. That's kind of a decent step forward. I also like the Bruce Leroy fight. I feel like if Alex Caceres is still around, let's match him up against Bruce Leroy. I think Bruce Leroy could give him a lot of problems in that matchup. And I actually like this fight the most to see if he's really at that level to compete in the UFC versus, a mid-level guy that's a crafty vet, 15 and 12, but not, world championship level. But let's see what he's got. For Rivera, though, I feel like what makes the most sense for him is they're going to give him a debuting guy. I think at his natural weight class of bantamweight, that makes the most sense. Now, next fight was huge win for Kevin Holland. Fast win for Kevin Holland. I honestly didn't even predict that, but he got him done very quickly in the first round. If I am the UFC and I'm gonna match Holland, I have him. Tapology has him at number 22 in the division. I like the fight versus Carl Robertson possibly. I think that's an intriguing matchup. I know he lost to Brendan Allen recently. Another matchup could be the Marvin Vettori fight, but you know, doesn't make sense. He's coming off one. I feel like Carl Roberts is a little lower ranked, at least by Tapology. I kind of like this matchup best. So I'm going to say I am going to go with the Carl Robertson fight. But because of how quick Kevin Holland had that fight, I wouldn't be surprised if this summer he's booked in a fight versus Marvin Vettori. I think that definitely could happen. Now, for Anthony Hernandez, he's in a bit of a tough situation, right? He's a young fighter, 7-2, only 26 years old. He looked good in his other fights. Marcus Perez choked him, and then this one, he just got caught early, man. He just had a tough performance versus a very skilled fighter. I mean, he still deserves somebody of notable name. I'm still gonna give him somebody. I'm actually gonna still give him somebody off a loss, of course. If I'm the UFC, I like Tom Breeze. I like this fight. Tom Breeze, if he's still, I believe he's still fighting under the UFC banner. I just want to make sure. Yeah, he just lost to Brendan Allen. I think that's an interesting matchup. I feel like that's the fight to make. I think that's a good fight, and I think that definitely Hernandez could win that fight. I think that's the matchup I would lean towards whenever they're both ready in the near future. But I am a fan of Hernandez. He's a good fighter, and with time he'll improve. Miguel Baeza knocks out Matt Brown. Matt Brown's older now, man. Baeza's a good fighter to watch, though. I like his striking. He was touched a bit by Matt, but he's still a very good striker, and I'm intrigued to see what he can do. I like for him to fight somebody solid. He fought Matt Brown, who's not really ranked super high by Tapology. But if I'm the UFC, I see this kid. He's got a good amount of potential. What's a name that really sticks out to me? I feel like the Randy Brown fight could be interesting. Those two could go at it. Or the Cowboy Oliveira fight is interesting. And if they really want to give him a big jump, I think the Bilal Muhammad fight could be the one to make. I'm going to say I lean towards Bilal Muhammad if I really have to pick. Those are the three, but I like the Bilal Muhammad fight. Now, for the man that he just defeated, where is he? He's right here. Matt Brown, he's on a two-fight winning streak, and now he loses. If I'm the UFC, I'm giving Matt Brown a fight that I believe will deliver very much so in entertainment, and that's the Nico Price fight. We saw Price absolutely scrap with the very high level and tough Vicente Luque. So to me, I'm going to give Nico Price, Matt Brown a go. I think that's a fun fight to make, and I think the UFC should do it. Absolutely will be a war. Let's go back to the card. Slowly moving up, Yadong Song pulled off, in my opinion, a controversial decision of Marlon Vera. I thought Marlon had it, but fair game to Yang Sedong, Yadong Song. I'm saying his name backwards. Good fighter. So I got to give him the respect. He's going to move up from this pretty well. I mean, I still don't think they should jump him too crazy in the rankings. I think that they should slowly build him. Marlon Vera was 30 here, so now he's at 29. If I'm the UFC, I'm leaning towards what's a name that really is coming out to me. If I really want to see an intriguing fight for him, if they want to really test him, I mean, Ricky Simon's a good matchup. Ricky Simon's very tough, and the fight would be an absolute banger of a fight. I feel like that might make a lot of sense. I know he has the draw with Cody Stamann, who's now, ranked pretty decently by Tapology here. Another fight that we could see, possibly. One thing I gotta say, Tapology's rankings, I'm so confused about how they have Henry Cejudo at number 8 when he's the world champ who just beat Marlon Moraes. So their rankings are not exactly super accurate, but just a good idea. Um, And look at that. Yadong Song destroyed Alejandro Perez. So weird. I like the Ricky Simon fight, though, for him. I think it's a good matchup. For Marlon Vera, I mean, yeah, he lost, but he gave a very good performance and a good fight. I'd like to see him fight somebody good again. I mean, they're probably going to give him somebody coming off a loss now. I mean, a lot of these matchups, man, I just feel like he's on another level. I feel like the Ray Borg fight versus Marlon Vera could be interesting. Stylistically, could be a good fight. Something that's standing out to me now. I don't know. I mean, I would like to match him up versus maybe even a Sean O'Malley, but just the losing is not the best. You know how many he's lost now, or excuse me, not how many he's lost in a row, but he's coming off a loss now versus that awesome win streak he had building. So that's the problem with controversial decisions, though. It damages your stock, even if the UFC says, "Oh, you should have won that fight." Christoph Jocko and Eric Anders, decent fight, nothing great. No disrespect to either guy. Jocko now will move forward. He's 22-4, very nice record. Decision fighter lately. He's really been getting a lot of decisions. They have him ranked 17 at middleweight on Tapology. I would like to see him fight. I mean, really, it depends what direction they want to go in. I mean, Marvin Vettori's an option, without a doubt. Brendan Allen's an option if you want to give him a big opportunity. And if they want to move him lower down in the rankings, the Omari Akhmedov fight could work too. I'd be intrigued to see that fight. That's something that definitely could happen. I don't think matching him up with anybody here, any of these fighters, is a good idea, though. Absolutely. I do not think it's a good idea. For his opponent, Eric Anders, I feel like he needs to be fighting more mid-level guys, but scrappy guys. The Darren Stewart fight is kind of interesting. I mean, I think that could be a good, fun, stylistic matchup. So I would lean towards doing that. Andrew Sanchez, it's a step down, I feel, for him. Yeah, I would say, you know what, that makes the most sense to me. Put him up against the dentist. Let's see, why not? Let's see what he's got. I think that he will pull off the victory in that fight, though. Stylistically, it's a better matchup for him. And it's not like he didn't give Jocko a very difficult fight and go the distance. Dan Ige, split decision over Edson. I thought Dan Ige lost the fight, in my opinion, but the judges here in Jacksonville seemed a little bit spotty. But for Dan Ige, absolutely great performance for him. I'm actually going to quickly go to the UFC ranking site so I can see their officials, since we're getting into guys who are actually in the top 15. Just so we don't get the mistaken rankings with Cejudo ranked 6 or something like that. That's crazy to me. So at featherweight, Alexander Volkanovski. Let's make sure that we're at the right weight class. Featherweight, yes. Okay. Let's get to it. All right, at featherweight, what's the right matchup for him? I'm going to move myself over, actually, just so we can look at featherweight. So we have Volkanovski as champion. Dan Ige ranked 15. Here is a tricky, man. It's tricky for me to pick on this one between these guys. I feel like Sadiq Yusuf could be the guy, just because, yes, you just beat Edson, but I don't feel it was all that fair of a decision. I'm actually going to jump here just so I can see the records. Moving myself back all the way over here. So Ige's here. I mean, the Josh Emmett fight kind of intrigues me if Emmett doesn't have anything booked at the moment, which he doesn't. Why not do the Josh Emmett fight? I think that's a more intriguing matchup. For jo- for Edson, this is tricky, man. He should have been given that decision, so it's just so frustrating to see him get another loss like that. Man, Andre Feely, maybe do the fight between him and Feely. I'm gonna actually lean towards even could do Jeremy Stevens. That's a fun fight. I think Jeremy Stevens and him is a good matchup. So I would say either go Stevens or I would go towards the Andre Feely tune-up fight, depending on what they want to do with him. And I think he could win both fights without a doubt. But Stevens does pose some big risk with the punching power. Now, Claudia Gadelha gets another very close split decision on the card versus Angela Hill. A lot of decisions tonight, a lot of decisions. Um, so with this fight, I know a lot of people said the result was 50-50, but Claudia did take her down a bit, got the win, so what have you. I know Carla Esparza and her talked a bit, and to be honest with you, that makes perfect sense. 6 and 7 on here. I feel like why not? Let's get those two in versus one another and let's make it happen. I think it's a good stylistic matchup and a fun fight. And for Angela Hill, I think you still got to give her a solid fighter. I mean, she really put on a solid performance. I think Karate Hottie and her is interesting. I think that's a good matchup. I think she could win that fight. Both strikers. That's the matchup I like for the co-main event. So now, without further ado, I got more to say about this main event. Alistair Overeem comes back from an onslaught from Walt Harris in round one to win by TKO in round two with absolutely beautiful technique. That head kick was amazing. He just looked very high level. If he had an iron chin, I think that he would be on a different level in the heavyweight division, but fortunately he does not. If I'm the UFC, I'm thinking of fun matchups for Overeem and matchups that push him towards a title, but not top of the top. Ooh, we have the greatest strikers by accident. I guess he's ranked in there. All right. Number 8 heavyweight on Tapology. If you look at the UFC rankings at heavyweight, okay, in the UFC, he's ranked at number 8 before this weekend. Maybe he'll jump one slot, maybe not. Let's look at Tapology so we can see the records of these guys. Similar rankings as well. I think the Volkov fight's interesting for Alistair Overeem. I think that's a fun fight, and I'm interested maybe in that matchup. And if Volkov doesn't have anything booked, I mean, why not? We'll set that up. Possibly. No, he doesn't have. He has nothing booked at the moment, but they might be trying to do the Blades fight. So for me, I'm going to actually say that Derek Lewis fight makes some sense now. I think it's a fun style matchup, and both coming off victories in their past bout, two for Derek Lewis. I like that matchup, and I'd like to see it. I was also leaning towards Dos Santos rematch, but coming off two straight losses, kind of hard to sell that fight between those two. Now, for Walt Harris, he's ranked on Tapology 11. He should be ranked higher than Oleinik. He beat him in 12 seconds. Um, I wouldn't jump him too far back. I think he's still in the mix. I think Rosenstruik's a fun fight. I think it's a very difficult fight, though. I think a Junior Dos Santos fight could maybe be in play. I mean, Dos Santos, two straight losses. Why not? I'd say those two are big options. And I think the Dos Santos fight is better for him because losing Dos Santos fight is more forgivable since he's got a bigger name than Rosenstruik. So I like either one of those two matchups. But Walt Harris, man, he showed a lot of heart. I got to give him a lot of respect. But ultimately, he was defeated by just a more experienced and better fighter in Alistair Overeem. It's MMA, and that's what happens. The sad story, it was tragic what happened with his daughter, but it's not a movie, unfortunately. And the great ending, the happy ending to the level that you want it to doesn't always happen. Now, Walt still has a great life and is a UFC fighter and will be back for more. So he's got nothing to be upset about. Absolutely, bright future ahead fighting in the UFC, and he's definitely going to keep going at it. For Alistair Overeem, still in the mix. He's not eliminating himself from the mix. He turns it up. I think that you put him in against Derek Lewis, you have a very interesting matchup, and a matchup that he can win. And now he gets closer and closer to the title. He inches towards it. Now, I'm not saying he's ever going to fight for the world title again, but if he does, I won't be that shocked. He's such a skilled fighter. If the chin was there, we have a different animal in Alistair Overeem. And I just feel Walt Harris wasn't at his levels, technically. He doesn't have the experience. He didn't have the same skill set of Overeem. Look at that fight difference, 46 and 18 and 13 and 8. There's a lot of years that go into this. But awesome main event, decent card. I'm excited for the next one, whatever that is. This is my post-fight analysis and what are the next matchups for the guys, the what's next part. I appreciate all you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and stay tuned because more content is on the way. I'll see you guys in the next video.